Welcome to the AMATIC 2017 webinar series. Today's webinar is Teaching with GAISE, Statistical Literacy for the 21st Century. This presentation is sponsored by the Joint Committee of AMATIC and the American Statistical Association. We have got a panel today of 7 speakers: Rob, Monica, Joe, Kathy, Megan, Rebecca, and Beverly. Please note that the views expressed by the presenter are not necessarily the views of AMATIC. Commercial products mentioned by the presenters are not endorsed by AMATIC. McGraw-Hill is proud to be our sponsor of our AMATIC webinar series this year. And in lieu of a biography, we're going to have each one of the panelists introduce themselves to you when it's appropriate and based on their role during the webinar. So without further ado, I'd like to turn this over to the panel.
Hello, everyone. My name is Megan Mocko, and I'm from the University of Florida. And I'm here with 4 panelists from community colleges, as well as 3 writers on the GAISE report. And we're going to be talking today about teaching with GAISE statistical literacy for the 21st century. Since there are so many of us, as we mentioned, we will either introduce ourselves or we will be introduced when we first begin to speak. So first of all, we would like to know a little bit about you. So we're going to do a poll to see if you have heard of the GAISE 2016 College Report or the original GAISE College Report.
So here is your poll. Your choices are that you have not heard of either report, that you have heard of at least one of them but don't know much about it, familiar with the original report, have heard of them and somewhat familiar with the contents, heard of both and read them thoroughly. So I'm going to give you a few more seconds to vote because not everyone has voted yet. All right, it looks like I don't have any more movement. I'm going to go ahead and end the polling. So it looks like 22% of you have not heard of either report. 11% have heard of at least one of them but don't know much about them. Only 3% or 1 person is familiar with the original report. The most number of people that you have here is 17 at 47% that has heard of them and somewhat familiar with the contents. And lastly, 17% of you have heard of both and have read them thoroughly.
Wow, that's wonderful. It's great to hear from all of you. If you haven't heard of the report or if you have read it thoroughly, I think there's something in this webinar for each of you. And we're going to have a link to the new report, the GAISE 2016 report, at the end of this talk. So what is the purpose of our conversation today? So the report was revised and endorsed by the American Statistical Association in August of 2016. So how does that impact our classroom? How does that impact teaching all across the nation? And so we're going to be having a conversation today about this. We're going to have 4 panelists from community college giving some input on why we might need to change, why we should change, and other parts of that discussion. And then we'll also get some input from 3 members of the GAISE 2016 writing team. So the panelists and the moderators, so the community college instructors and the 3 writers, 3 of the writers, there were many writers on the GAISE report, sat down and figured out some questions that we thought would be important to address. And so these are the questions that we came up with, and 2 panelists are going to address each of these questions. You know, why do we need to change? How has their course changed in the past 5 years? How did the panelists get started making change? And then how do we sustain this momentum of changing our courses?
So good afternoon. My name is Beverly Wood, and I'm an assistant professor of mathematics at Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University. And I was involved in writing the revisions, partly because my dissertation was based on the original GAISE, the framework of goals for students and recommendations for teachers. And so it seriously impacted my teaching of statistics. And so when we thought it needed a little freshening up, I was happy to be involved on there. And so, you know, I'm here now with the community college instructors looking to answer these questions. Why do we need to change, and what do our current students need to be productive members of the workforce? Same questions I asked myself 10 years ago. So Kathy Kubo and Joe Gerda from the College of the Canyons in California, we'd love to have you share your thoughts with us, please.
Okay, so I'll start off first. I'm Joe Gerda, and as was mentioned, I'm from College of the Canyons, where I've been a 30-year member of the faculty, teaching mostly statistics. And before that, I was a statistician at UCLA School of Medicine, and I continue to be active as a statistician. And so, overarchingly, the reason why we need change is for our students and to help them evolve. And just as our practices evolve, lots of things have changed. And the biggest thing that came and happened for me in my past 30 years is computers. And so once we involved computers, that opened up a lot of things. And then on top of that, along the way, we're learning more and more about how students learn. So how do they learn standard deviation after doing a couple problems where they hand calculate it? Well, it turns out the work at the University of Minnesota shows probably not. No, most students don't learn that way. And so what I thought was good teaching 30 years ago is not what is good teaching. And so I've had to change so that my students can learn better. And so the research on learning is continuing on this day on how to get them to better understand what's going on. And it's not just from the drill method that we often use in our algebra courses. I'm not sure they learn particularly well there either, but in statistics it's even more difficult because they're faced with all those word problems and they get confused with the language. And so the biggest recent change is we want our students to learn and be better prepared when they go out into the world. The other thing that's really made it crucial for us to change is the way that we can handle those large data sets that are real. We can bring that context, and we know students learn better when they learn within the context of whatever the problem they're trying to solve. And so if they're answering questions and trying to solve problems, and they're real data sets and they're large data sets, then that gets them closer to what's exciting out there. And so mostly we're doing this so that students will learn better. And also now part of that is learning in context. And I'm going to now turn it over to my colleague, Kathy.
I'm Kathy Kubo, and I've been at College of the Canyons as a math faculty member for 17 years. I will add to what Joe was saying, which is it makes it so much easier nowadays to be able to analyze large data sets because of the widespread availability of user-friendly software and applets. So here at the college we use a software that is web-based. We've used Minitab in the past, but it makes it very, very easy for students to be able to work with those large data sets. Also, the availability of textbooks and materials with a conceptual approach. When I started teaching statistics 6 years ago, even just the changes that have been made in the past 6 years, it's pretty stunning how the approaches have changed in those materials.
As students transition from our colleges to the workplace, their ability to make sense of data is really helpful. The ASA website even points out if you have students who are liberal arts majors, and if they have a sense of data and can go into jobs that have any data involved, they're even in liberal arts majors and humanities, they'll be able to command salaries $13,000 to $15,000 on average higher. So having them be able to make sense of data is crucial. That also will allow them to be managers. So I've had the opportunity to be an administrator here at my college on a number of occasions, and it's around making sense of data that's really crucial as you move forward in any workplace. And the world is becoming more data-driven. Not that we should only be data-driven, but it's an important part of what's going on out there. And more, we're measuring productivity through metrics that are easily measurable. The other thing I think they really need to understand is making a decision. So making a decision based on using some sort of statistical thinking. So understanding the idea of whether you expect a difference by chance or not. And that's a wonderful tool. It's a probabilistic way of thinking. And just that alone allows them to start to make sense of what a forecast is. Because there's all this information that keeps coming forward to them in the news. And so their ability to be able to make a decision and to do so in a statistical way, I think is really helpful.
And to continue with what Joe was saying about making sense of data, it's important for students to be able to ask questions as they're looking through the data about where the data comes from and how was it created, are there any limitations, and this will impact the kinds of decisions that they eventually make about the data. Students should also have meaningful experience working as part of a team. It's very crucial for them to get as much experience before they're actually in the working world. And so they can deal with group dynamics, how do you handle disagreements or disputes, and working through all of that in a safe learning environment.
Great. Thank you, Joe and Kathy. We have another poll for us asking you how much impact GAISE has had on your institution's Introduction to Statistics course. My screen doesn't show the poll yet, Julie. Oh, there we are. So you're still pre-GAISE, meaning that you haven't paid much attention to those guidelines from the ASA in designing your courses, undergoing some changes right now that's trying to become aligned with those guidelines. You've been doing it, and maybe there's a little trouble sustaining those changes. Or you've made good progress and you're doing a good job here, following fairly closely. And if you don't know, because you don't know enough about GAISE, that's fine too. We just like to get some understanding of where you are right now.
Okay, perfect. It looks like everyone had a chance to vote, and it looks fairly even, you know, plus or minus a little bit here. 15% are still pre-GAISE. 29% have had some changes in line with GAISE. 15% has undergone some changes, but has had trouble sustaining the changes. 20% follows the guidelines closely, and 22% are not really sure if their course is in line with GAISE yet.
Great, thank you, Julie.
Oh, there it is.
Yeah, I forgot to hit share, sorry. Sorry about that.
So now I'm Rob Carver. I've taught about as long as Joe at Stonehill College, which is in the Boston area, and was trying myself to follow GAISE guidelines from the original report in our courses. We've now seen in the survey results that we're a pretty diverse group. People are at all different places on this pathway to GAISE, and we'd like to hear from, in this case, Joe once again, and Rebecca Wong from West Valley College, who can drill down into some of the experience of their institutions. So let me turn it back over to, maybe we'll give Joe Joe's up first. Okay, Joe, go ahead.
Okay, first of all, the biggest change has been around using real data, and the transition I'm going to be making in the fall will be large data sets. But right now, all our pre-statistics classes and statistics classes, we do a survey And so we have a data sets of 600 or more, or 800 students in this data set with 33 questions. And then students will be using that during the semester for different projects. Some of them are obviously categorical data, some of it's quantitative. So we usually, so that the students can study themselves. So that's kind of a fun thing. And it was through that we found out 45% of our students had Macintosh computers or Apple computers. And so we had to change our software. So it was actually within the software that within this survey, we figured out we had to change something because the software wasn't very friendly to Apple products. So that's really been crucial. Real data, and now I'm moving to bigger data. Data sets with 50,000 or more cases and multiple variables. So they can think about multivariate thinking. Another thing, sort of in line with what Kathy was talking about, students working in groups, I have lots of group presentations and some individual presentations. But it's pretty important for them to be able to communicate their results. And so whether it's through writing, which is the next topic, or through presentation, or through group presentation, that's crucial. I've had the privilege, as I mentioned earlier, of being an administrator, and twice I've been the assistant superintendent. And whenever I had problems with employees, it was always around, could you work in a group? And I want a low stakes opportunity for students to be able to do that. And so that's both helpful in their statistics, because they have someone to bounce ideas off of, but also it's helpful to them in life, because they have to work with people they generally wouldn't have worked with before. And I mix it up, and I'm always choosing their team. And so I think more presentations. They have a first aid poster presentation. They have a mini presentation on a topic more of their interest. They have a group project, which is this idea of getting up there and speaking around numbers. And it turns out some students are good speakers and not particularly strong on the math side, and so they balance out. And so I like the idea of multiple ways of assessing. So I think it's also an authentic assessment. If you can stand up in front of a group and you can present data and you can make sense of it and tell a story, then I think that's a good thing. A lot more essay writing. So on their first exam, they have to write a comparative essay between two, on a quantitative variable disaggregated by, say, sex. So on the last test, on this semester, it was drinks, the average number of drinks in the last week. And they have to look at it and they have to analyze it, but they have to write it. And I think writing is really difficult to do. And to have them rewrite it, and they type it after, even after the test is over, they have to go home and type it up and bring it in and bold, bring in with corrections, the corrections in bold, and resubmit it, because writing is rewriting. And it's this idea of editing. And so what I want to do is get them in that idea that if they ever decide to go on in their area of minor, they'll be able to write a thesis within, even as an undergrad. And the other thing is, I think my role has now become managing productive struggle in the classroom, and then at the end of that, reaching closure through explicit connections. And those are terms I got from Jim Stigler. And so I see my role in the classroom changing dramatically, but these are sort of the core ideas.
So I guess I could just jump right in. I'm Rebecca Wong. I teach at West Valley College, which is in Northern California. We're located in the Silicon Valley. And I'd say that a lot of my changes are really similar to the ones that Joe mentioned in his presentation. I'm just going to talk about a few other things that I think have changed in my class. I've been teaching statistics for over 20 years. And when I first started teaching statistics, to give you an idea of how long ago that was, I taught with a 4-function calculator and a lot of tables. And I remember the great joy that came when we finally embraced the graphing calculator. But now what I've moved on to is software. What's enabled me to make that switch is the availability of web-based software where students can access it on their smartphones, on their tablets. So I no longer have an accessibility issue as much as I used to in the past. So the software has allowed me to have students look at much larger data sets, real data sets. the reason I really have switched to software is because I really think a lot about transferable skills. Like what skills am I trying to impart to my students that actually can take with them? So skill with the TI graphing calculator is not something that someone puts on their resume. I often tease my students. I say, you're not going to go into your first job and wave your graphing calculator and go, look, I'm really good with this. But experience with the statistical software package might be something that a student could put on a resume. So let's give our students experience with statistical analysis using tools that people in the field use. It doesn't have to be this exact same statistical software package that they might use. You know, it doesn't have to be SPSS or Minitab or something like that, but just some experience using software to analyze data. I think that's really important. I also think that using software enables me to assess their statistical conceptual understanding much more than graphing calculator, which I felt I was assessing their syntax skills instead. Assessment has really changed over the past few years. If I looked at my tests 5 years ago, even 3 years ago, I see that they're very different. I've made a conscious decision not to have my students entering data into software or into calculators in any test situation. I want to assess those skills using a time frame where they can be more careful and they're not nervous. So I'll assess that during classwork or homework time. But in test situations now, I'm much more likely to give them an output from a statistical software package and ask them to use that to answer a question. So for example, I might give them several regression analyses and ask them which of the variables had a stronger relationship and why, that kind of thing, versus having them produce R values on exams. This year, I've made a conscious effort to include intentional discussion of statistical literacy. I think in the times we live in, we can't stress enough that we need a statistical literate population. And I used to think that just taking my course and through the experience of going through the curriculum, statistical literacy would develop. Now I'm much more intentional about this. I bring this in constantly. This is something I just feel very strongly about. This semester I've had an opportunity to put together a lot of materials on this topic, and I think at the end they're going to share our contact information with you. So if you would like to email me, I'd be more than happy to share with you the materials I put together on that topic this year. Another thing I've done change is I make much more time discussing statistics as a major in a career pathway. So as a community college instructor, I feel the responsibility to expose my students to statistics as a possible career pathway. Students entering four-year schools might already know that this is something they want to pursue, but community college students often are unfamiliar with this as a possible pathway, and they only discover it after taking an introductory statistics class and enjoying it, and then deciding they might want to explore it more. So I use the ASA site, This is Statistics, and related websites as well periodically throughout my course. I use materials there during my first class to demonstrate the growing need of professionals with data analysis skills like Joe mentioned in his presentation. One of my first assignments is to have students watch one of the brief videos on careers on the ASA website and do a short writing assignment. And during the semester, I have my students do a project where they interview a professional in the field and ask them how to use statistics in your work. I think it's a great career path for students interested in STEM, but who may not enjoy physics and chemistry like engineering majors might need to, and also don't want to code. So I'm very intentional now about introducing statistics as a major in a career pathway. I use GAISE as a guidepost with more intentionality. When I'm trying to decide between how am I going to assess something, or what activity am I going to do, or I have this many more days, what am I going to put in my syllabus, I look to GAISE for a lot of guidance. And the last thing I want to mention is I've been doing a lot of thinking about the 4 C's: critical thinking, collaboration, communication, and creativity. These are skills which were 21st century work skills, if you will. And so I try to make sure that throughout my course, I incorporate these with great intentionality. So these are some of the ways that I think I've changed my course in the last 5 years, especially due to the GAISE guidelines.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Rebecca and Joe. Oh, I just want to make one little segue, Megan, if that's okay. When you open up the GAISE report and start to look at it, and you listen to what Joe and Rebecca just reported, they've made many changes. The GAISE report suggests many changes, but nobody starts by making all of the changes at once. And so now we're going to shift over. I'm going to turn it over to Megan for discussion of where do you begin?
Yeah, so hopefully we've made a compelling reason for thinking about changing or continuing to change our course. But where do you get started? You know, how did the panelists get started and making changes? What's a good starting point? And what change would you recommend to start off with? So we're going to start off with Monica Dabos, also from the College of Canyons.
Hi, everybody. I am from College of the Canyons, like Megan said. I've been involved in statistics education for 14 years. I got my PhD in that area, and I love the GAISE guidelines. I actually started my personal experience in 2005 GAISE guidelines, and as I started, I realized very quickly that I had some challenges and also some, I was some blessings at that time. I started with the challenge of trying to implement technology, meaning that in our school, we couldn't even use calculators. But I was blessed at the same time because my school at the time, Santa Barbara City College, was using Marta Aliaga, one of the first editors or first leaders on the GAISE, the first GAISE guideline. And her book was Introductory Statistics. It was ahead of its time because I used real data, we used activities. And so I was blessed by being able to, by simply following her book, her textbook, being able to apply the GAISE guidelines. So, but that didn't mean I knew how to use it properly because sometimes we don't have the same understanding of the word. So going to US CUTS, United States Conference on Teaching Statistics every 2 years, had made me really understand better what was the GAISE guidelines. So sometimes we have two types of challenges, I think. One is the challenges of personal limitations and the other one, institutional limitations. I think and the personal challenges, personal limitation is that sometimes we don't have a statistical conceptual understanding very deeply, and on top of that, we may not understand the GAISE guideline language. It's not a complicated language, but what does it mean technology? I remember, is it technology means using a calculator enough, or what does it mean really? When they say activities, what actually they mean by that? Is it filling a worksheet full of standard deviations, calculations by hand? Is that activity? And statistical thinking is not a clear terminology. So we can get in this place, we think we understand what we're doing, but we don't. So the other one is the institutional limitations, which is no access to technology, resistant to change, or using the mandatory textbooks, which is outdated. So where do we start? My first recommendation was to start small. Trying to implement all at once is very challenging, but for you and also for institutions. So I would recommend you start where you feel the most comfortable, you are 100% sure what you know and understand, where you feel secure and clear. What challenge will I recommend? Many of you maybe already do that, but I will recommend stop lecturing. Start where you have control. And many places, institution-based, you might not have control, but you do have control of your teaching style. So there are many lectures nowadays in YouTube, Khan Academy, MOOCs. And so if you just do lectures, you can be very easily replaced with somebody else. But if you engage in critical thinking in the class or an activity base, then you don't have. And another sheet I like to use is the merging of the on the lanes. I think when I started learning how to drive, they told me you don't just steer the wheel to the next lane. You go very slowly. So think about you going to move to the next lane, then softly switch, and all of a sudden you're on the. It's very subtle. So I will ask you to change, for lecture to an active learning, like a changing lanes. Think about it first, and then slowly move to direction. All of a sudden, you're going to be doing activity-based learning. That's for me right now. I think Kathy Kubo is going to continue.
So for my experience, I feel actually very fortunate that I hadn't taught statistics. I had no intention of teaching statistics until 6 years ago. And so I didn't have any established plans, there was nothing except the experiences I had in my own statistics classes in my education. And so I was able to start out by talking with Joe and having him give me a copy of the GAISE report and reading through that. So it was crucial for me to have mentors right away. And Joe and Monica have been mentors for me, as well as faculty at other colleges in the state. It's been important to talk with people who have a lot of experience in working with statistics in the real world, so I could figure out what would be best to implement in my class setting. I came in at a time where there was a lot of professional development available for focusing on statistics pedagogy, and we're very fortunate in California to have those kinds of opportunities. So I could not only think about statistics content, but then also just good pedagogy. My recommendation for anyone starting is just to choose the topic or concept that you're most interested in. What are you most passionate about? I agree with what Monica was saying. I think it's important to start there and start small, but do what you're comfortable with. For me, when I started, writing was very comfortable for me. Doing group projects was also important for me and something I had taken away from my other classes that I taught. So that was where I had chosen to start. But for other people, maybe statistical literacy is a good place to start, incorporating active learning. So it just really depends on what you're most interested in.
Thank you, Monica and Kathy, for that wonderful advice. I just want to add in that some of you might be thinking that because of the setup of your course, maybe it's online or it's flipped or it's too big or it's too small, that it's not possible to use the GAISE guidelines. Well, there is an appendix that's just for you. Appendix F talks about learning environments and talks about some perceived barriers of maybe implementing the GAISE recommendations, but then how do you get past that? It has some excellent statistical education research and resources, as well as some inspiring examples on how to deal with some of those issues.
All right, so we're going to talk to Rebecca and Monica again about some of her favorite resources and how GAISE can help you sustain that momentum. I think Rebecca's going to go first.
Yay, there's my slide. Okay, so several people have mentioned already the GAISE appendices are wonderful. So if you're thinking, well, what are project ideas, or how would I start with an active learning activity, or what would a GAISE aligned assessment look like? The GAISE appendices are full of suggestions, so that's a great starting point. I've mentioned before the ASA has a website, This is Statistics. And I use that regularly in my class and as a jumping off point for other resources. So it's a great resource on why someone should take statistics, includes short videos on careers and applications. They have a wonderful PowerPoint, which I show on the parts of it on my first day of class of why I take statistics. Twitter, I've become a real Twitter addict. I don't tweet. I don't tweet myself, but I use Twitter to follow accounts geared towards statistics. And if you're not using Twitter as a source for your classes, you're really missing out on a wonderful resource. Twitter delivers applications to me daily. So for example, this is just from one day. I wrote down the things I saved from Twitter just on one day last week. There was an article from the New York Times, why marathons are more dangerous for nearby residents than runners. So it's about a study on marathon safety. Another one, today's young workers are more likely than ever to have a bachelor's degree from Pew Research. Real or fake news, let statistics help, 7 questions to ask. So that was from the ASA Twitter's feed. And another one from Pew Research, how can a survey of 1,000 people tell you what the whole United States thinks? So that was just on one day. And I used to have to search for these articles, and then I'd have to bookmark them, and then I'd have to remember where I put them. Now I can organize them on my Twitter feed. It's amazing. And every week I can bring in something from that week's news related to what we're talking about. As much as possible, I recommend attending conferences, AMATICs. So most of you maybe are AMATIC members. 10 years ago, if you went to AMATIC, statistics, I don't think had its own strand, or if it had its own strand, there were gaps where there wouldn't be sessions offered. Now there's an entire strand of statistics. You could go to a statistics workshop at every session of every day of AMATIC. Another conference I try to attend regularly is ICTCM. It's very focused on technology, but they also offer a statistics strand that I found really helpful. And then one last source is my students. If you get them excited, it can be contagious. So for example, now we at our college have a budding data science club, which I don't think we would have had we not, like in my classes, been talking a lot about data science and careers in data science and that kind of thing. So my students this semester started this club. They've reached out to Pinterest, Netflix, eBay. Those are just 3 places that they Skyped with and conferenced with. And I just had the president of my office right before this webinar came. She stopped by for office hours. And this summer she's doing a internship at Google. So get your students excited, and then they will provide you with a lot of excitement and resources as well. So those are my suggestions.
Thank you, Rebecca. I agree. When you get the students excited, it enthuses you as well. Help you keep that momentum going. Monica?
Yes, hi again. How do I keep going in the path? I love this question because path never ends. This path never ends. It's not like you do all the changes at once and that's it. You are done for the next 20 years. That's not a path. I love path because it means there is always a place to go. So the question is how you keep in the path. Keep yourself connected to the statistics education community. That has been the biggest gift I ever have to my education, career, and understanding. Reading articles from the Search, which is a journal for statistics education, and also JSE, or going to the US COT conference, United States Conference Statistics Education, connecting with the leaders of the field of statistics education. So if you don't know who the leaders are, which is possible, if you're not in the field, you may not know who are the leaders, reading the literature, looking who get awards, very soon you start realizing who the leaders are, you know, and connecting with them is the best gift you can get. For me, the latest and more clear message is multivariate thinking. And I heard this from my guru, I call her my guru, Dr. Roxy Peck, multivariate thinking. And the first thing in my head, you bring your own understanding to this language. And you thought, oh, there must be multivariate regression analysis. But I was wrong. She clearly told me not necessarily means that. So this semester, my first attempt to use multivariate thinking from the first day was this semester. In the first day of class, I gave my students a data set about a company with several variables in it, including gender, minority status, beginning salary, current salary, year of education, year of current job, and job classification. And I asked my students, to figure out questions of interest for this data. The students were engaged and wanted to figure out if the salary for male and female was different, but they also took in consideration the year they were at the job, or the educational level of the job classification, because that will mean that we can separate whether the salary is different from only male or female, or because there is other characteristics. And being able the students to figure out that alone, that's for me at least my understanding right now of multivariate thinking. And helping my students to, and myself also, develop multivariate thinking is my personal path on the teaching and learning of statistics. In US COT 2017, I love one of the presentation by Chris Wall, which he talked about walking through the data, visualization of divide and conquer. And that was really fantastic to me, and always get enlightened and more clear what I'm supposed to be doing with these new approaches. I have a master's degree in statistics, and I've been teaching for 14 years, and I always tell you, I always find new things of what I'm doing because I haven't obviously grabbed everything I wanted. So It's not the ones you have done, and like I said, you are done. And these PowerPoints can be downloaded from the US COT conference, and you can actually, if you were not there, be able to get resources in that way. The question is also how to keep in the path. Stay connected. Stay connected, stay connected. Like I already mentioned, the appendix of the GAISE has many tools and examples how to apply things. But staying connected, even to Twitter, as you just heard right now, or to leaders on the fields, or to other colleagues, keep you this flexibility to understand how to apply. Also to check your understanding, because sometimes we think we get it, but until you talk to somebody else, you realize maybe you didn't get it fully. And so going to the US COT 2017 was an amazing thing, but it's also coming out the ICOTS International Conference for Teaching and Statistics. I have the link in there. The ECOS 2018, which is a regional conference, and it's online. You don't have to move your house, and you can already be connected away. And of course, it comes also the US COT 2019. And I want to get a special note for, I don't know how many, we didn't do a poll of how many people are for the community colleges in here, but that's my special area. And we got the ASA to lower the membership for those in the community colleges, only $54 instead of $200. And I give you the code in there. So if you are a two-year community college, you can be part of the ASA membership, and you will get in touch with the larger community statisticians. We're going to start a two-year community college community so we can relate and ask questions and so on and so forth. So that's basically my tips for you. I hope you get connected. You can email me or try to connect with me through my college or conference and so on and so forth. See you.
Thank you, Monica. I'll mention, you mentioned the appendices in general, but I'll tell you that Appendix A includes a little bit of background on how GAISE developed and who those leaders are, who those thought leaders are in statistics education that wrote things in the 90s and early 2000s that have kind of gotten us to where we are with statistics education, and includes all of the links to those journals that Monica mentioned and the conferences. So Appendix A has a lot of that information, and there's also an appendix dedicated to that multivariate thinking to help you understand what it is and give you some examples.
Okay, it's Rob again. Excuse me. We did pretty well for school teachers. We thought we would talk for 30 minutes. We talked for about 45, but that leaves us 15 for some question and answers. And if you would enter questions in the Q&A box, we've got some questions about Let me jump to Theodora's here. How do you define statistical literacy? You could cop out and say, take a look at the GAISE report, but let me turn to the panel.
Anybody want to take it? Or? Okay, so for me, statistical literacy means that you are able to discern, read a newspaper, an article, and discern whether the article was done properly, whether the data was collected properly, whether the type of conclusions they're trying to make, they are really appropriate to their. So basically, understanding how to differentiate the lies from the no lies, because like everybody says sometimes there is two types of lies, but that's because people don't know exactly how to discern. So if you become statistically literate, I think you'll be able to spot when somebody didn't do a random sample, or when the conclusion doesn't match the experiment that they try to do, or they only look at limited analysis instead of look at the multivariate way of looking at it. So for me, it's more like how do you, the consumer of statistics, and be able to spot the right things. At least a little bit of my interpretation of statistical literacy. Somebody else can jump in.
And I would echo what Monica said, and I throw in this idea of the difference between an experiment and a study, and how that gets conflated by journalists. And just sort of what conclusions can you make from the data? And it's like how it would come to you normally in the course of a life, even if you weren't a statistician. So how can you consume the information? But I believe it was Rebecca that brought it up. Rebecca, did you want to add anything?
No, I think I think those are great definitions. I think Robert's right. GAISE does define it too. For me, it's just a matter of, when students are presented with data, what kinds of questions should they ask about it? How do they know what kinds of conclusions can and can't be made from data they're looking at? How do you use data to answer questions? So I really think of it, a lot of it, in terms of being a consumer, especially of the data that they're often presented with in the media.
Let me, as a follow-on to that, I don't know if it's okay to use names, but Judy Williams asked, can I ask a question of everyone? I'm looking at the Q&A box. Maybe Julie, do people see this Q&A? Can everyone see it?
I see the questions.
They can see the Q&A box.
Okay, so Judy asks, and I don't want to skip Angela, but while we're talking about literacy, so in the state of Virginia, the Commonwealth of Virginia, we're changing to one course for statistical literacy, which most students would take, and then one for students who must do statistics and psych and add it, for example. How would you make the two courses different? So how would a literacy course differ from an action-oriented stats course?
Can I just say that I'm looking ahead at the next question about that StatCrunch isn't actually a software used by statisticians in practice necessarily. But so that may be part of the answer to Judy's question, is what kind of software that is used in a course for psychology or education. They might, in fact, want to use something a little more closely aligned to statistical practice in their disciplines. No, StatCrunch isn't free. It's fairly cheap compared to SPSS or SAS or Minitab or something like that. But Minitab Express, I believe, is used at universities. So it kind of gives you a taste of what Minitab is like, and in some places would use it for practical statistics. So kind of trying to answer like 3 questions all at once. Mm-hmm. But I see a new one on there about R, and that I'll let somebody else handle that one.
If I could just jump in, because I think I'm the one that brought up statistical software and resumes and that kind of thing. I don't think the actual platform you use is as important as it is to, in general, just give students experience with software, as opposed to graphing calculators. I think there's a lot to be said for, some people are very reluctant to give up the graphing calculators, and yet at the same time, if we're trying to give our students transferable skills, a student who analyzes on StatCrunch can easily transfer that to SPSS, can easily translate that to Minitab, so it really doesn't matter so much that they can put on their resume, I know StatCrunch, but the idea that we have given our students the experience of using software as a tool versus a calculator as a tool, I personally think that's huge.
And I want to answer a little bit about the question about the literacy versus do, because I think there's 2 paths in statistics, and I'm happy that you guys want to do 2 different courses, but for sure you can be just focused on statistical literacy, basically be able to read articles and discern what is appropriate and not appropriate, and the other one is to do statistics. So if you have the ability to do those 2 courses, I would think that will be a great way to actually put a lot more emphasis, because in my case I try to do both, and sometimes I try to do both, you water down a little bit each of those areas. So if you can divide them, that will be good. And I think they're very different, because once you can do statistics, you can also become critical consumer of statistics, but there are a little bit different skills, like reading articles, discerning from the articles, methods, how the data was collected, and so on and so forth. It's very different than be able to have a data set and figure out all the things, all the questions that can be asked with a data set. So I think they're a little bit different, and if you had the ability to do 2 different courses, that would be great. There is some question I see there. There's what topic should be in prerequisite class interest statistics courses that is not calculus based, and that's I a question that maybe Joe can answer.
Wow. Well, I'm certainly happy to answer it offline as well. But really what you need to do decently in a statistics course is slope of the line and how to deal with very modest marginal percents. So what needs to be in a prerequisite class is probably very little. And I think in California, we're going to start looking at things like co-requisite models. So most students who can write and have had Algebra 2 in high school can do well in the statistics class if they have the time for it. So I think very little.
I think in general they need a number sense, a little bit of number sense, not necessarily a lot of computation skills, especially nowadays we're moving more and more to computers and calculators and software to do the mathematics behind. Like I say, it's more like the statistical thinking process that is very important, and the connected knowledge that sometimes it doesn't happen, but that's more important skills that the mathematics background in my experience. Mm-hmm.
And then probably it's just good to mention the skills that they don't need. So the prerequisite skills that they don't need, which we've traditionally required of students, is a lot of the algebraic manipulation skills. And so, especially in California, and I think this is a trend throughout the country, to look at really backwards mapping what is actually needed in statistics for success, and then eliminating all of the rest of the clutter that we used to have students go through in order to get to a statistics course.
Yeah, Rebecca, I want to also mention that algebra sometimes seems so necessary for statistics because people teaching statistics, they teach like an algebra course. And in that case, you need the algebra prerequisite. But if you teach statistics the way the GAISE guidelines are trying to guide us through, you don't need algebra in that sense at all, you know. So I think if you feel like you need algebra, it's because the way you are teaching statistics. So if the more you become aware and conscientious of the GAISE guidelines and where the path's supposed to be, what is the needs. It's not a path just because few people decided that. It's just the needs the society are requiring of people right now, and disconnected knowledge because we have so much information, data's everywhere. So now how to make sense of this data out there? And so algebra doesn't seem to be the needed tool right now. Maybe it was in the past, but not right now.
Okay, well, it is 5:30. I want to just be mindful of people's time. If the panelists want to stay and answer questions after I turn off the recording, that is awesome. They keep coming in. They keep coming in, flooding in. So I'm really glad that you guys all had, obviously it stirred a lot of questions, got you thinking about some things, but I do want to wrap up the webinar, then I'll return the recording off, and then we can still answer questions if you want to. Thank you for participating in today's AMATIC webinar. If you'd like to support future AMATIC webinars, please consider becoming a member. Please see bit.ly join/-AMATIC. We are on Facebook. We're also on Twitter. Check us out on social media. Please note that the recordings of past AMATIC webinars can be found at the website. This is in my signature. Note that it takes 1 to 2 weeks to produce and upload the webinars, so it'll be a little bit, but I will email all of you to let you know that it has been posted. Really important, please take 2 minutes to evaluate the webinar content and the presenters. This is just a generic slide. I didn't change it with an S. Sorry about that. If you need confirmation that you attended this webinar, you want one of those certificates, you need to fill out the survey. So it's bit.ly/AMATIC60, and I might be able to find that link and pop it in the window for us, and I just goofed that up. Sorry, I did not mean to get rid of that. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording and then put that link in the chat window for you.